Hey guys, so our second project is all about process, and I really want you to get involved in it kind of playfully, like exploring things, right? So you're gonna need a few things. I already went outside to my garden and I picked out a few branches. I also picked out some dried up plants that this is, I think, grass that got dried up, but it has some interesting things in it, and also some also I picked up some of this dry herb branches that I found to be very interesting, and thought that, you know, when I looked at them, that if they made marks, they would make like some interesting marks on paper. I also had some feathers around the house. I had these bird feathers, but you may also find maybe you have some those costume feathers around that you could use. As you could see, I also grabbed some Q-tips. I also had some yarn and this rope. This is a brush that I already had that was made before, and I think it was made with some twine, sort of like rope like this, but a little bit harder. So if you have some twine, that would work really nicely. What else? I also brought some toothpicks, and I'm just gonna play around and make a couple brushes with you. You're gonna need some scissors, and also maybe I don't know if this might be a little too thin, but I brought this to tie the pieces to the sticks so that to make my brushes, but maybe something thicker would work better. So we're just going to experiment and play. You're also going to need some paper for this project, and I'm going to try to make everything with just regular printer paper. And then you're going to need some typical, like any container for water, and some black tempera paint. So I don't actually have black tempera paint, but I do have some black acrylic, which I'm going to use. But any inexpensive, you just need a little jar. You don't need this much, but you can just get one of those tiny little jars that cost like $1 or something, and that should work for this project. And then you're going to need a little container to put the color into. So I think I'm going to start with some of these branches. And it's interesting because, like, this stick, for example, is really long. It's almost like too long for a brush, but it has an interesting other end where it's like split. But I think I'm gonna leave it very long because it's a very different experience of drawing with the long handle. So I just want to play with that. And to the tip, I'm going to attach a few pieces of this dried up branches. And I'm going to tie the string tightly around it just to hold it in place, right? And just tie it up and cut it. So be open to improvise, be open to experiment, really find things that catch your eye, that you want to test out to see what marks they make. So there, we already made a brush just like that, right? Because you can dip this into paint and you can paint with this. However, I think I want to make a fuller one. So I think I'm going to add more pieces to it just to get some extra like marks to it. And also I noticed that when I move it, this moves too easily. So maybe if I put another piece, it will be a little sturdier, or maybe even I could put a piece on the other side. This is starting to look more like a broom than a brush, but hey, we're experimenting. And I guess you want to like see they're kind of facing in one direction or in two directions. I think I like them in one direction. So I'm going to put them like this. You may want to play some fun music that really moves you and that puts you into this place of playfulness, and not worry too much about the outcome or whether you're doing it right or wrong, and just allow yourself to kind of play and experiment and explore the world a little bit this way, right? This is an essential part of every creative person's process, is this sort of experimentation and playfulness. Sometimes things come out amazing and new discoveries are made in this process, and sometimes, you know, you have to throw things away because they didn't quite work out. But it's all part of the process. So this is my first kind of, I don't know, it looks like a witch brush because it looks like a broomstick. It's my brush number 1. And let me see what I can make from this grass. Maybe The other thing is I don't want these pieces to be falling off when I'm painting, so maybe I'll take some of them off and maybe put a few pieces together, break them. But I think I want to cut off the stick. So, oof, I cut off too much. Maybe like that. Yeah, I kind of play with it to see how I could potentially move the brush across the paper to make a mark, and whether I find that interesting. This is kind of an interesting end too. Alright, so I'm going to take another stick and connect all this to the end and just tie it up with a string. Just tie it up enough so that it doesn't fall off in the middle of you painting. And again, you can use a thicker twine, you can use rubber bands, anything you can find. Tape is a little tricky because if you get it into water, it might come apart. So string or yarn or twine is much better than tape. You might be able to use wire maybe if you have that at the house. But also, like I said, rubber bands. Rubber bands are great. So if you have rubber bands, I just don't have any right now. Those are really easy to use, and you just kind of snap them on and then you have a brush. So here's my other kind of witchy brush. Now let's make some. I was thinking I had this like Home Depot stick, and I was thinking I could arrange almost like a comb-like brush. I could arrange toothpicks on one end like this. This would be better glued probably. I'm not sure if I could make it. I think I'm going to use tape for this a little bit and then put the string around it as well. So this would be almost like a comb. Actually, if you have an old comb, you can also use it, or if you have like an old toothbrush, those make really fun tools as well. But I'm going to align these like that. You can see it will focus. There we go. You can see it focused. So something like that. And I have some Scotch tape here, so what I'll do is turn it over like this and tape them. Oops. This will help them stay together, and I'm going to try to make them kind of at the same level. So maybe do this. I don't know. I've never made this kind of brush, so it's a little trickier if you want it to be precise like that. So then I'm going to just wrap a little bit more string around it to hold it in place. And now you can also test out the brushes while you're making them, or you could make them and then test them all out. Alright, there we go. So that's, we'll call it a comb brush. You can also use both ends of your stick, like this is one brush, but maybe I could put some Q-tips on the other end. Maybe just 3, kind of like more spaced apart. And maybe at an angle like this. And I will use a little bit of tape to hold them down, and then tie it with a little bit of string. Alright, so now I'm going to make this soft one, this soft rope piece. I think I'm just going to attach it, let's see, that, like this. I kind of like it with it a little bit coming out, like being really uncontrollable. So I'm going to tie it here. Now I'm going to also try this yarn, but I think I'm going to tie it a little bit closer to the end, maybe something like this. Maybe I can fold it so and cut it so that I can have more ends. It's fluffier a little bit, and I can tie it to this one. What else do I have? I will use these feathers, I think, just by themselves. So here are my tools, assembling on the side, and I still have a bunch of Q-tips, so maybe I could make a fuller Q-tip brush, kind of with all of them, something like this. That looks nice. And I have one more stick, so I'm going to attach them to the stick around. It's a little tricky with Q-tips. Maybe I'll have to wrap them a little bit at a time on different sides of it. So let me try. So tempera paint is good for this, but if like me you have acrylic paint, I don't know if you can see right here, acrylic is a little bit thick. So I'm going to add just a little bit of water to it. And just make sure that you mix it really, really well so that you don't want to have, see how I have water and paint? Mix it really good until it's all one. All right, so I hope that you have at home this printer paper and lots of it. And to start this project, I would love for you to make some bigger sheets of paper by simply taping them together. You can tape them together into a long sheet so that when you flip it over, it'll be kind of like this. You can use just a few pieces of tape. You can make a longer piece or a big square piece. I'm just going to make a longer piece so that you can see what I'm doing on camera, but it's fun to do both. So you could make a bigger rectangular piece as well. The reason for the bigger space is so that when you're testing out your tools, you could make much freer marks and let your brush kind of flow over bigger areas. I think that's as big as I can go for the camera. There we go. That should work. I'm going to make 2 of these so that I have plenty of play area for my brushes. So that will take about 6 sheets of paper, but then we're also going to need a few more. So maybe I'll use about 10 sheets of paper. We're going to need a few more to fold because we're going to also make some symmetrical marks. So here we go. This does not have to be perfect, just so that you have kind of a bigger sheet to draw on. And here I have, oops, my mixed color, which kind of got mixed with a little bit of paint that was in the jar prior to this. And I think I'm ready to start. Actually, this stick that I was mixing with, which is kind of like one of those wooden skewers, can also be a mark making tool with which I can draw and make all kinds of marks, right? So that's even something that you could use as well, right? And let's try the Q-tips first. So make sure you dip enough so you could see the color on the Q-tips, and then allow yourself to be moved by the music, to be free to explore all the different ways in which this brush that you've made, this mark making tool, would become, I think the Q-tips doesn't need a long handle, this should work, in which this could become an interesting tool. For example, I find that the Q-tips, I thought they would be like really linear, but I find that they're very soft marks, kind of reminding me of water and inviting me to make these sort of watery marks, right? Let's see now what these toothpicks would do. I think I need a bit more paint. I think toothpicks could be interesting for a kind of cross-hatching and creating textures with very, very thin. They make extremely thin lines, almost look like as if somebody cut into the paper. You can make the marks separately, or like, as you could see, I'm making the marks interact with the marks that are already there. As if these thin marks are growing out of the fatter marks that I made before. Kind of creating a little bit of shading, but not necessarily thinking of them as shading, just thinking of the different marks and how cool they look next to each other. Okay. Now, let me try this 3 Q-tips. You can also kind of dab like that. You don't have to necessarily only move, so those make some pretty cool dots on my paper. And you can make them in one direction or in different directions. I like that. Let me see how it moves. It's kind of cute. Like a little triple smile face, double smile face. And you can see my paper is getting filled up, but as long as you're still interested in, as long as you're still finding space that's interesting for you to make marks in, like for example, maybe I put more marks in one area and see how they overlap with each other. And you can continue working on one paper. Let me try now my broomstick. I don't even know how to. I think I'm going to need to put some paint into a bigger container for that, because the brush is too big for my paint container. So these tiny scratchy marks kind of adding interesting texture to this original piece. And even though I'm not playing music in the video so you guys can hear me well, when I make art, I always like to play music. My brush is falling apart a little bit, but I can use the pieces separately. But I like to play music to put my mind in a state of playfulness and exploration, in which my mind is not too preoccupied with what my painting or my drawing or my creation looks like, right? So I'm more interested in discovering things through this process. So let me try feathers. Ooh, I like the feather. So beautiful. That's probably my favorite one so far. And let me try this yarn. You can see how the space is getting filled up. I like the yarn also because it's really kind of dancing across the paper and making lots and lots of tiny little footprints. So beautiful. And what I wanted to show you, what we'd like to make also are some symmetrical designs. So for example, you can fold the paper and make your marks on one side, like here for example, and then refold the paper to print the same marks and press it on the other side so it becomes symmetrical. Right? So here we go. I'm going to make a few more that are symmetrical. And maybe try other. I have to fold them quickly so they imprint immediately while the paint is still wet. That's better. And they don't have to be exactly the same as long as there is an echo kind of. And I think you can do it more than once. Like for example, if you make one and you open and you're not in love with this one, then you can add some more, maybe to this side, and then print it. So it has layers of both images, right? And then you can see how it's interesting when you paint on this side and then this is an imprint, and then you paint on the right side and imprint onto the left. So you have both the stronger, blacker image and also the lighter image. So make enough so that when you are ready to make your kind of a puzzle design, a tessellated design, then you have enough to work with. More. I'm gonna try this brush. Nice. And maybe I'll go back to my dots. That's pretty cool. You can see how this design is symmetrical, right? And what else? I haven't tried this brush yet, so I'm going to try it. Very subtle. So now I have all these paintings, this here, and this here, and this, and also the original, and the very, very first one, which I'm kind of tempted to add to, but allow all of these paintings to completely dry first. Okay, so we're gonna let them dry. So while your paintings are drying and mine, I'm going to show you how to cut this paper into triangles. These are not going to be equilateral triangles like I suggested because it's going to take a little more time to do that. But I think the triangles will be perfect for making your design. So first, I'm going to fold my paper lengthwise in half, and then I'm going to fold the halves again, or you can fold it over like this in halves. But basically what I have done is divided it into 4 long strips. Now these are going to be small triangles. If you want a little bit bigger triangles, we could maybe only fold the paper in half. Let's make both so you can see what you like better. Once you have folded it, you need to cut along the folded line. So after you've cut them, you're going to have some thin strips like this and some wider strips from the paper that's folded in half. And now to make triangles, all we're going to do is fold it by aligning this edge to the side edge like that, and continuing by folding over and over again like so. So you can see. So as a result, I have these markings for triangles, and then I'm going to cut it. The same thing is with this bigger paper, except for now my triangles are going to be larger, and might not even fit all the way to the end. So the pieces that have dried, we're going to use to fold them as well and to make our triangles. If you want this bigger paper, you can cut it into smaller pieces, or if you want, you could make some bigger triangles as well. It's kind of up to you, right? So this one, if I wanted to make the half triangles, I could cut it in half like this. And now fold my pieces to make my triangles. Kind of be surprised by what comes out as my sections. Just make triangle number 1. Pretty cool. There's my triangle number 2, 3, and 4. And I'm going to cut all of these into these triangles so that when I am done, I am able to reconnect them into designs that I find interesting, kind of like a puzzle. And I think what's interesting, if you cut some white pieces as well, you can also incorporate them into your design. So not all of them have to be painted. Some of them could actually be blank pieces to sort of give yourself a little bit of a break. So you can see how it can become very interesting as you continue arranging them. So I'm going to cut all of them up. So now I have some smaller and some bigger pieces. You can choose to make your final mandala either using only large pieces or only small pieces, or you can combine them both. And just like I mentioned before, you can also use blank pieces as a way to incorporate kind of a break into your design, right? Something like that. You can see kind of has a negative and positive effect. And when you compose them together, really kind of again try to reconnect to the process itself and see what looks interesting next to each other. The cool thing about the pieces is you can continue rearranging them or moving them around or completely changing your design, looking at it in this way as kind of like a form of a diamond, or looking at it in a square shape, or you can begin with a square shape and then continue with the smaller pieces. You can use the front, or you can flip them over for the part that's clean or blank, to allow yourself to have pieces that are. You can also use them kind of like this in a way as a negative space. You can make spaces between them if that looks more interesting to you. You can arrange them on black piece of paper, which I think I'm going to do. So I had this really big piece of black foam core, and I decided that the pieces stand out and look better on black. So if you have some kind of colored paper or black material, you can use that. But if not, you can do this on white as well. I want to kind of play with the smaller pieces, and again, I can also use parts of the black as part of my design. I like that when the contrast between something that's not there and something, and the marks that are there, makes it really dynamic, so I like that contrast. And I also want you to think about symmetry in this project. So kind of imagine if I have this image on the side, maybe I create something symmetrical on the other side to sort of echo the marks and echo the movement on the side. So maybe something like this. And let's see if I can incorporate the bigger triangles into it. So once you create something that you really love, you can begin to glue the pieces down, but I really recommend playing with it for a while so that you can experiment with different different possibilities. Now, these triangles don't exactly fit into the size of the smaller ones, so actually maybe I can find a way to fit them in. But you could decide either cut them to a different size, or you can play with them in a way that they don't fit, maybe in a way that they transform the original design into now a new kind of tessellation, maybe like this. Again, just remember to kind of play and invite your eyes to look for patterns or designs that you find exciting and interesting, and the patterns that make you dream, like make you imagine new things that now you begin to see in these patterns and in these marks. And in this case, it's really helpful to see both the positive, which is the marks and the triangles that you've made, and the negative, the spaces in between. And are you making some interesting forms in those spaces as well? Just kind of allow the process and allow the pieces to take you somewhere where you might even feel surprised yourself, where you find something unexpected, like how the pieces come together. Kind of running out of my triangles, I think. I kind of like that. So I will stop there for now, but if I cut some more triangles, I can continue and maybe add some more pieces. I only have a few little ones here. And add a few more pieces to my design. So once you're finished and you really love what you created, either use a glue stick to glue your pieces down. If you don't have a glue stick, you can use a little bit of tape. It will look better with a glue stick, of course, so that you can kind of see it all together. And also, if you're using a piece of paper underneath, you can also cut the shape around it to make your design in a certain form. In a certain form, it could be a rectangle or even a circle, like a real mandala. And just notice how the different marks flow through and they echo each other because they all came from the same piece. So the marks in here and the marks in here come from the same brush and the same movement, but yet they're kind of separated. A little bit like as if they're broken and they want to find each other. And so when you look at it, the eye kind of moves like a dance through all the marks. I hope you like the process. I hope you kind of get lost in the process a little bit and play and discover, and make something that you find surprising and interesting.